Good afternoon and welcome to the show. I'm Jim Flyzik. Today's show we will be discussing progress made on information and intelligence sharing initiatives in the federal government. With me today on the show are Kshemendra Paul, the Program Manager of the Information Sharing Environment at ODNI, Ray Mendez, the Chief Data Officer, Information Sharing, Defense Intelligence Agency, Donna Roy, the Executive Director, DHS Information Sharing Environment Office, Matt Keller, GuidePoint Security, Ralph Kahn, Tanium, VP Federal, and Robert Laurine, the Chief Technologist, Consulting and Intelligence, HP Enterprise Services. Let's get into the subject and talk a little bit about how we're doing in intelligence and information sharing. Let's start with Kshemendra Paul over at ODNI. With Kshemendra, I know when we think of intelligence and information sharing, in my mind, I picture you sort of like right in the middle of it all. So can you give us some ideas of some of the progress you see being made as you work these issues?
Sure, Jim, thanks, and thanks for having me here today. It's great to be a part of this forum. We work in the nexus of national security and public safety, and there's some exciting developments there. A big set of progress we've made over the last little while is aligning field-based intelligence and information sharing entities. Look, we got the fusion centers, the National Network of Fusion Centers, over the last decade or so. Prior to that, we had HIDAs, high-intensity drug trafficking area centers. Prior to that, regional information sharing systems dating back to the 70s. What we've been able to do is align these field-based entities that are state and local entities and also the corresponding federal entities. And a specific business process that we've been using to tie them together is deconfliction. So this is law enforcement event deconfliction and also starting to move into case subject deconfliction. Right now we've tied together previously stovepipe systems, so we have about 3,500 law enforcement agencies representing about 400,000 uniformed officers doing event deconfliction now. You deconflict in one, you deconflict in them all. Distributed, decentralized system.
Great. Sounds terrific, man. It's coming a long way. I remember back in my day, there were all these systems out there all doing various things. It sounds like they're all slowly being pulled together and consolidated into one so that everyone can share with everyone else. Ray Mendez over DIA. I would see DIA being another agency that would be right in the middle of information and intelligence sharing. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the progress that you're seeing at your agency?
Sure. I mean, my position as the Chief Data Officer, one of my big tasks is to free the data. Historically, our data has been locked within IT systems or software applications built specifically to handle a particular type of data or data around a particular issue. And as we move into this cloud environment, eyesight, everybody's hearing about, one of the big tasks that my office that just stood up has is inventorying all of our data, identifying the systems in which it resides, and then finding a way to take that data out of the system and put it into a cloud environment so it can be shared to a broader audience.
Cool.
So, I mean, just this week, I've got 71 applications for data sets that I have to review. They're going through the process, which will be taken out of systems currently that only DIA can use and moved into the cloud environment so it'll have broader, across the intelligence community, other analysts will be able to see it.
Yeah, cool. Sounds like that evolution of, need to know, need to share, responsibility to share, getting the right information out. That whole trend that we've seen over the years. Ralph Kahn over at Tanium, tell us how your company is supporting customers and the kind of progress you're seeing being made in supporting your customers in this area.
So from our point of view, we look at it as kind of a vertical slice around cybersecurity, since that's what our focus is. And there's been a tremendous amount of progress. The first step you need to take in terms of data sharing is to have standards that describe the data you're trying to share, and then you have to make it easily accessible and interchangeable among the parties who want to share it. And then it's ideally good to have automated tools and processes that make that data as effective as possible. And we support all of those kind of dimensions of the cybersecurity sharing kind of infrastructure.
Putting all that support services in place so that the customers can get done what needs to be done. Ms. Donna Roy, I guess whenever I think of an information sharing program, you're the first person that comes to mind. I think of that role at DHS and the fact that you've been playing such a strategic role there. Can you give us some ideas of the progress you see from your perspective?
Well, thanks for having me and the kind words. I do think of myself as the center of the universe for information sharing as well. I think we have so much success, it's hard to narrow down what to talk about. but in 2013, I think I talked all about HISN, being the year of
Right.
HISN, and
Absolutely.
14 was the year of the data framework, right?
Okay.
We have a big cloud instance of our data. I would say this year is all about information integration and bringing it all together. And so I've seen my portfolio grow, and I now have programs that deliver platforms or enable capabilities all the way from identity to data. And we're starting to see all of the programs integrate. So HISN uses NEAM. The geospatial uses NEAM and the IC standards for data tagging and the geo for NEAM capability. So I would say that I have a thread all the way from identity across all networks, across all domains, through data. And I think it's about integrating it and making it go faster and making more data available to our enterprise.
Decision making at the speed of sound. I like that stuff, and I love that identity. I actually believe if we can get the authentication and identity thing nailed, it's going to enable a whole lot of other things to become a whole lot easier. We'll see. Bobby Laurine at HP. Now, you've had a chance to see the world from both sides. You have a history inside government working these issues, and now here you are working it from the HP platform. Tell us a little bit about some of the progress you're seeing from your vantage point today.
Sure. We've been focused in on a concept known as the new style of business, and really it's the identification from mobility all the way through cloud enablement and providing better support to the customer and from a mission perspective. What I bring to the table is understanding that mission and really making sure that we're aligned to support the overall customer better. And we've had a series of products and initiatives specifically in the area of security, as well as mobility and cloud technologies that really can be pushed forward to support the customer much better in the area of information sharing and continue to build on that. So very enlightening with respect to the transition from government to industry. And I can tell you that my viewpoint is that it made significant progress over the last 10 years as it relates to information sharing and the ability to be providing a sort of a common operational picture to support the customer base. So
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is. And having Kshemendra talk about it, I know back in my day, remember all those, different efforts going on all over the place, and then fusion centers. And now when you talk about it, you talk about it as, sort of one entity. So obviously, yeah, progress has rolled along very nicely. Matt Keller, tell us a little bit about GuidePoint security and in the way you fit into the information sharing environment and the kinds of things you're doing and progress you see being made.
So one of the things, and again, thank you very much for the invite today.
Sure.
One of the things that we see in this day and age, and it's relevant in the news every day with the OPM breach that just happened, a lot of these other cyber attacks that are going on across government, is getting threat intelligence from a cyber standpoint out to sensors and getting it. So there's been a big concentration on getting information that is being collected from all these different agencies and even from industry, the banking sector, retail sector, healthcare sector, all these big data breaches, getting that information into a central repository to get it back out. I mean, we talk about this every day and we hear about all the bad news with PII information and credit card information being breached and all the people that now have to get, credit monitoring. But getting that data and sharing it is very critical in today's day and age to prevent a lot of these attacks. We have to be right 100% of the time, and the attacker only has to come at us and be right once. And we've seen that very much so in the world today where we have to start preventing a lot of these attacks and getting that information and sharing it amongst DHS, DIA, ODNI. They're very crucial in that industry in getting it out to the different sectors that are out there.
Yeah, excellent. Well put. Excellent. Yeah. I intentionally stayed away from the cybersecurity issues for this show today and focused strictly on the information sharing. We've got a cyber show coming up in a couple months, and it seems like there's plenty of information out there today that we don't need any more information out there right now on that subject. But let's talk a little bit about specific programs. Our listeners, some of the feedback we have, they like to hear about general progress, but then the listeners always say, tell us about a specific program that you really think is making a big difference. Start with Ray Mendez this time over at DIA. Ray, could you point to a specific program that you think is making a difference and really come a long way in helping improve information intelligence sharing?
Well, I'll go back to what I talked about a little while ago, the whole eyesight program. It's just coming online now. Capability-wise, as far as I'm concerned, is being able to take data, various types of data, and we're doing a lot of test pilots, and I can't really go into the details of the classified, pilots that we're doing, but just the capabilities that that eyesight now enables us to do within the intelligence community to not just share our data, but be able to manipulate data in massive quantities. Whereas you used to have teams of analysts have to search individual intelligence systems, pull their search results out, put it into another system, either whether an Excel spreadsheet or some sort of
Right.
other system, and take days or weeks to fuse all their results together to create a product. Now, an analyst or a team of analysts working with a data scientist can create an algorithm to do that, and then just let it run constantly.
Right.
And then it'll automatically alert them when your parameters have been met, when these intelligence indicators have tagged off, whether it be signals intelligence, geo intelligence, human intelligence, all these different indicators have flared, you get an auto warning, and hey, you need to look at this now.
Yeah, so an automated alert system, kind of like what I have on my phone, which I signed up for. I had no idea how many of these alerts I was going to get every day, especially with the thunderstorms and severe weather and heat index and all that. But certainly it's obviously a great tool to have. Donna Roy, what do you think? You mentioned several programs there when we first talked. What is one that you think right now is one you would point to that you think's really cool, doing some really cool things and really going to make things a lot better in the future for information sharing initiatives?
So the one that comes to mind is the DHS data framework. So it
Okay.
is our answer to the intelligence community's new way of doing IT and big data. We've been piloting and working with our privacy, civil rights, and OGC oversight offices. We now have near real-time transactional data going into the data framework, providing speed to intelligence for that analytical capability. So never before have we been able to co-locate CBP data, TSA data, ICE data at this volume, at this scale, and at this sort of availability for the analytical engine. So I would say that we're making impacts on the front news that we can't talk about today.
Right.
But it is giving DHS game in the intelligence and the analytical capability. And it's because we worked with our oversight guys from as late as 2010 to start building privacy into the way we do business. I would say the second thing is we've been able to impact the eyesight standards by bringing DHS's flavor into that capability. So we're growing. We're beating the federal government at their own
Right.
game. I think we have the leading edge implementation of eyesight for the complexity that we have, and I'm excited about it. I run to work every day. I can't wait to keep working on this.
Wow, that's exciting stuff. Some people say if you get a job that you like doing it, you really never work again, right? You're just having fun every day and making progress and feeling good about yourself. Good for you. Kshemendra Paul, what's some... if I asked you, Kshemendra, to point at something that you think is a really cool program that today, want to single one out that you're proud of in terms of the progress you're making, what would you point at?
Well, like Donna is saying, there's so many areas where we're making progress. And earlier I highlighted sort of the big picture, enterprise view, reducing fragmentation in our national public safety, national security enterprise. I'm going to switch gears and get into some engineering details. On standards, Donna was just talking about the data framework, and underneath that, there's a real use of ISE data standards, frameworks like the National Information Exchange Model and the rest. A specific area, again, we partnered with Donna and the NEAM program at DHS, worked with the Open Geospatial Consortium to better align geospatial standards with ISE standards, including NEAM. So we've gone through now a couple of efforts around engineering analysis. And just recently, earlier in June, the Open Geospatial Consortium, in their test bed in Boulder, Colorado, demonstrated full-stack information interoperability with geographic markup language and related geospatial standards, the NEAM, the National Information Exchange Model, ICISM, the Intelligence Community Information Security Markings, to do attribute-based access control. They generated 30 engineering notes out of this. So this is an example of the success that we're having distilling these ISE frameworks, the technical frameworks, into what we're calling project interoperability and anchoring them underneath our public-private partnership, the Standards Coordinating Council. Really key to scaling up our information sharing activities.
Yeah, wow, sounds terrific. Sounds like a tremendous amount of coordination that needs to be done, but sounds like it's getting done. Matt Keller, if I said point at a program, you are aware of that you think's really making a difference or making some progress or helping make progress in this area? What would come to mind to you?
Well, I'd reference the InfraGuard program that is ran out of the FBI with community. I think that program over the past 10 years has gained a lot of momentum out there in the industry and protecting the critical infrastructure and being able to share with community members from industry and from government to be able to share threats against the infrastructure across the board. Whether that relating to power or water or even just basic criminal activity as it relates to terrorism. I think that program has grown in the past 10 years exponentially. I've been a member for 10 years of that program, and over the past 10 years, we've gotten very little information out to the community, and now it's really gotten more readily available to give us unclassified data that we can take action on to protect the infrastructure programs.
Yeah, good point. Now, I guess, too, just implicit in everything else we heard here is the fact that the private sector is playing a big role in this information sharing. I think one of the things we learned a long time ago is the government can't do it alone, the private sector can't do it alone. It's going to take everybody working together in order to make these things happen. Ralph Kahn, Tanium, what do you, if I asked you to point to a program you think's pretty cool, making a difference and actually making progress and helping move things forward with this information sharing, which one would come to your mind?
Well, there are a lot of them. The one I'm most familiar with is eyesight. The intelligence community has a very unique problem in terms of collecting a lot of information that's useful and trying to find a way to normalize it, deal with the equities involved, and get the right information to the right stakeholders at the right time. And there's been a tremendous amount of progress made there, particularly over the last 10 or 12 years. So I think there's a lot of good things happening there.
Yeah, cool. We've heard quite a bit about eyesight, so obviously it is one that's making a difference. Robert, Laurine, what do you think? Bobby, in terms of programs you see or a program you see that you would point to and say, there's a program that's making a difference?
One of the interesting things is I mentioned the new style of business, and it directly relates to the overall architecture of eyesight and sort of a one-to-one correspondence that we found that industry could actually enable different components of eyesight. So let me give you a specific example. We've been working in the area of security and the ability to be able to encrypt information within existing applications. And the nice thing about that is if you can encrypt it, it looks similar to the data that you have, but you don't have to change the legacy application that you have. And it represents a significant return on investment with respect to each one of the agencies here in incorporating that technology. Another area we're looking at is in the area of software-defined networks, the ability to be able to dynamically stand up sort of a network analogous to expanding your 2-lane highway to a 12-lane highway when you need it, depending on the data that you need to transfer, and then get it back and get it to the source that you need, the cloud environment that you need, and then actually do away with it so you can't see it. So there are some very novel technologies that can enable things from an intelligence community perspective and an information sharing perspective.
Yeah, I love the analogy too. I'd love to be able to expand them highways from time to time. We've been talking about progress. We've been talking about specific programs. I think we need to talk a little bit too now about some of the lessons we're learning along the way. I know that some people think this information sharing, how hard can that be? But I think of what I've learned over the years is there's a lot more to it than what meets the eye when you actually get in there. So we're going to talk about lessons learned, but first we need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Kshemendra Paul from ODNI, Ray Mendez from DIA, Donna Roy from DHS, Matt Keller from GuidePoint Security, Ralph Kahn from Tanium, and Bobby Laurine from HP Enterprise Services. We're talking information intelligence sharing. We've talked about progress. We talked about individual programs. Let's talk about some of the lessons you're learning along the way. We'll start with the Tsarina from DHS, Ms. Donna Roy. Can you tell us, Donna, some of the lessons you're learning as you try to work through some of these tough issues and make progress?
I think the most we've learned is around the Homeland Security Information Network, right? So we started this little pet project probably about when you were starting DHS.
That was the one that was at one point dead, and then
One
came
point
back
dead.
to life.
We brought it back to life. 43,000 users.
Wow.
What we've learned is to make an enterprise platform work that well, you really have to listen to your users. And you have to develop a common thread for what they need, even though they don't understand what that common thread is. So as an example, there's a real angst around processing information for requests for information, right?
Right.
We heard it in pockets. We're starting to automate that for the fusion centers to make sure that we have a standardized way of exchanging that information that becomes actionable
Right.
for them and for their exchanges between their fusion center to fusion center, but also fusion center to state and local below that and above that to the federal government, right? No one told us to build this RFI processing. We just heard, the angst around the capability to automate that business process. So we're sitting with the users. The same thing the intelligence community is doing is putting data scientists with the analysts, right? Sit with the users, build what the users need, deliver it quickly, using agile approaches or continuous delivery, but always start with the users. And the second thing we've learned in the data framework is that if you don't include your oversight groups, your privacy, your CRCL, your OGC guys,
Get the stakeholders in there.
from the beginning,
Right.
when you do information integration, when you try to bring it all together at the end, you have to hit the redo button because
Yeah.
they will ask you why you did everything and what decision point across the way. So be inclusive at the table when you're building these things and always listen to the mission because they're right.
Wow, that's a great lesson learned and great advice to get all the stakeholders at the table up front so that you don't have something down the road that is a constraint that gets thrown into the middle. And what a novel idea. Talk to the customers about what they actually want before you build the system. I love that. I mean, Kshemendra, Paul, over at ODNI, what are some of the lessons learned along the way? You've been in the middle of this stuff for quite some time, so you've probably seen the good, the bad, the ugly, the successes, the drawbacks. What are some of the key lessons learned you think you'd like to talk a little bit about here today?
Well, the information sharing environment's got a prime focus on terrorism-related information. And post 9/11, a lot of folks got into the CT fight, federal, state, local, many agencies. And the searing lesson of that experience, where folks got into the fight first and figured out how to work together second, right, really distilled into two things that I hear over and over again from all of my stakeholders, federal, state, local, private sector. Number one, folks really want to see unity of effort. They feel like that's hard won, and they want to build on that unity of effort that's come out of the terrorism-related homeland security information sharing efforts that have been very successful over the last decade plus. Two is as we ramp into looking at other threats in this nexus of national security and public safety, cyber being a key exemplar, they want to leverage the existing efforts. They want to build from and extend what they have as opposed to building new stovepipes or point solutions.
Sure.
They want to get out of the whack-a-mole kind of concept and look at things in a more holistic way. So it's that unity of effort, maintaining it, extending it, building from what we have, leveraging the existing infrastructure, whether that's technical shared services infrastructure like HISN and the data frameworks, the information sharing standards we've developed, whether that's business capabilities like the RFI that Donna just talked about, or suspicious activity reporting or other like things, or the policy frameworks, like the privacy policy frameworks that we put in place across all of the ISE stakeholders, whether that's federal, state, or local. So.
Excellent. Yeah, Donna, your response is very complimentary there, and focus and keeping the stakeholder, the unity, everyone working together kind of concepts. Ray Mendez, what do you think are some of the things you're learning along the way, some lessons learned that you'd see that maybe you'd pass on to other colleagues that are trying to work through these same kinds of issues?
I don't know how this applies across the government, but I know within DIA, my job has only been around for 6 months, so I spent the first 4 months doing a lot of research of how we do business with our data.
Right.
And one of the things I discovered was that historically we have viewed information management, data management, and records management as 3 distinct functions in 3 separate directorates, different people doing different jobs with different responsibilities. And when I dug into it, I found out that there's a lot of overlap and duplication and authorities that even overlap. And so as we're taking this opportunity to free our data from our legacy systems and put them in a cloud environment, one of the things that we're doing based on these lessons learned is we are looking at how we're going to manage our data holistically from the beginning to the end. So when we acquire or we collect data, we have to think, what are we going to do with this data 25 years from now when it's no longer of mission relevance? When we are going to either declassify it and make it available to the historians, or we're going to purge it because it's personal information about somebody, it's PII. How do we tag our data at ingest from the very beginning, knowing that 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the road, something has to be done with this data? And so we are adjusting our policies and our business processes to look at those issues up front, because right now, how it's worked historically is everybody's focused on support to the warfighter, which is important. We need to do that. That's our mission. And we'll worry about how we're going to handle the cleanup later, because that's 20 years down the road.
Right.
Unfortunately, we've got an office of people who sit there looking through boxes of hard copy files like from 25 years ago. What do we do with this?
Yeah.
Because they were
Excellent.
kicking the can down the road.
Yeah.
So now we're looking at this now in the digital age. It makes it a little bit easier. We can, in our process, address the disposition of our information up front when we load it. When the same time we're looking with the lawyers, how can we share it? On what countries can we share it with? What authorities? What security clearances are required? We also look at how are we going to handle this in perpetuity.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me. It's fascinating to me. I know the chief data officer is still a relatively new concept, and it's evolving, and people are trying to understand, some of the roles. But obviously, some of the things you just explained there are very, very important roles to be done. And having someone focused on that, I think, will make a difference today as well as into the future. Very fascinating. Bobby, Laurine, what do you think is some of the lessons you see that you're learning as you work through some of these issues?
What we're seeing is that our ability to be able to leverage the information sharing and analysis centers and the activities associated with use cases around those is extremely important for industry. And, we've leveraged the standardization activities on the interoperability framework, making sure that's exposed to industry so we know exactly where we need to focus in supporting interoperability. But in addition, if we take the next step in working these specific use cases from the national customer all the way through the first responder and ensuring that they have the technologies, for example, in analytics and data management, they handle the large volumes of data that we need to handle to do the crunching on the overall data to provide the valuable insight and the predictive analysis. That's what we need to focus on, and that's what we have been focusing on, and we'll continue to do that. So it's opening sort of the door between industry as well as government, and what are the opportunities to continue to make inroads in driving information and interoperability from an information sharing perspective.
Yeah, I think you brought up a big point, too, about the business analytical tools, and the tools are getting so much better to be able to actually deal with the volumes of data that you need to deal with to do this kind of work. So
It's been a big change.
yeah, absolutely. Ralph Kahn, what do you think at Tanium? What are some of the lessons you're learning along the way, things that you're seeing, and perhaps, that as you work your way through, you say, well, it's interesting, didn't see that one coming, or okay, we got to do this a little differently, those kind of things that we're passing on now to others working these kinds of issues.
So I'm taking a little bit different approach to it. There are a couple of table stakes that have to happen for information sharing to work. And the first thing is that the organizations sharing the information have to feel like they're putting it in a secure environment. They have to they have to feel like the information is being treated in the way that they would intend it, and they have to feel like their information is going to be protected, secured, and kind of released in an appropriate way. And from a Tanium perspective, one of the lessons we learned is that's difficult to do in today's cyber age, where there's kind of the threat of imminent cyber attack hanging over almost any system out there. And so we tend to focus on the back end of it. How can we help ensure those systems are secure enough and high enough assurance that organizations feel comfortable putting their very valuable information in there so it can be shared?
Yeah, good point. That cybersecurity issues, and what we're learning in some cases the hard way is the bad guys are looking to stay ahead, and they're watching what the good guys are doing, and they're looking for any way around those controls that are being put in place, looking for the weakest link to get. So it's good that we're thinking of those things proactively. Let's try to proactively think of the things that the bad guys might be thinking before they can actually take action on them. And Matt Keller over at GuidePoint, what are some of the lessons learned that you see along the way here? Things that pop up along the way that you say, oh boy, didn't think of that one, or this was something good, something that I need to adjust to, something I pass on to others.
So one of the two things that we've been concentrating over at GuidePoint Security is not only do these applications that have siloed into individual data centers getting pushed to the cloud, which is a great thing for information sharing, but protection of that information. And we found that out in 2013 with Mr. Snowden taking all that data and running off to Russia. So how do we protect or identify individuals accessing that information? So one of the things that we've been working with is not only that information sharing model, but also identifying users that are using that via PKI authentication and adjusting, who's accessing that information. So as somebody runs off or takes the data, we can identify what the compromise is to national intelligence. So one of the things we've been concentrating on is identifying that potential insider that is taking that data. And that's one of the biggest lessons we've learned is not only after 9/11 can we share all that information out to everyone, but we need to know who we're sharing it with and what type of life story that person has so we can make sure that information is protected in some way, shape, or form, not only from a system side, but also from an access side. We want to make sure an individual that has a need to know keeps that need to know while also sharing it with the people that are required to see the information to make actionable decisions on the information.
Yeah, that insider threat's an interesting issue. You still read that a lot of the vulnerabilities we have are still internal. So, in some cases, it's the espionage spy kind of stuff. In some cases, it's people stealing information. In some cases, it's just plain mistakes or errors or carelessness or not following rules, which open up doors and open up vulnerabilities, or accidentally clicking on something you shouldn't click on. So I think that's a big area that needs to be addressed as we move along. So glad you brought those points up. Let's talk about some of the barriers and constraints that are still out there. Some of the hard things, some of the things every day that you're trying to get done, and you're sort of like knocking your head against the wall because it's you just got to get this stuff done. Let's start this time with Ray Mendez again at DIA. Ray, what are some of those tough things yet, the constraints or challenges that you need to overcome to really get to where you want to be with these programs?
Well, for DoD, we have probably a unique situation in the sense that we're supporting a warfighter who deploys to an austere environment. So all these databases and these systems, the cloud environment, we're so hyped about, and we're seeing these great capabilities come online. That doesn't really help a warfighter when he's working out of the back of a Humvee, some forward location, and
Right.
he's sipping his data through a straw as far as bandwidth.
Right.
So we're simultaneously trying to build the infrastructure to meet our needs back here, to increase the sharing and the ability to work with big data, while still meeting the needs of our customers, which are the warfighters out forward. And this is a huge challenge because we're not going to be able to afford in these fiscally constrained environment to replicate these capabilities that we're building here domestically all around the world.
Yeah.
You can't afford it.
Yeah.
So where do you split the difference? And part of it's technology, part of it is accepting more risk. But the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines today, they're grown up in the environment where they've got a smartphone in their hand,
Right.
and they expect it to do a query
Absolutely.
and in under a second get the results.
Yep.
Not do a query, wait for 4 minutes, and maybe get a result when they're forward deployed. And that's sometimes kind of the position that they're in.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Infrastructure around the world. I know I ran Secret Service communications for years, and when we would travel overseas, we were faced with some real serious issues with, the bandwidth and being able to communicate. In some cases, be able to communicate at all. So we'd have to put in all kinds of temporary communication. So I can appreciate that one big time. Kshemendra, Paul, what do you think are some of the tough things out there, the constraints, the challenges, things that you need to sort of like get over that hurdle yet in order to get to where you really want to go with these programs?
In the President's 2012 National Strategy for Information Sharing and Safeguarding, we identified a number of barriers. The top two, and those are the ones I want to focus on right now, are the incredibly dynamic and evolving threat and continued presence of unaligned management practices across agencies, not only federal, but federal, state, local. So the threat We're in an unprecedented threat environment. You've heard this from Director Clapper. Many others have talked about that. You've got the terrorism threat, which started with core Al-Qaeda, that franchised out. You've got foreign fighters and terrorist travel, and you also got now radicalization and mobilization in place. Right. That's just a terrorism-related piece. Then you layer on top the other homeland security considerations, transnational organized crime, cybersecurity, the insider threat. It's quite a dynamic threat environment, and so while we've made a lot of progress on information sharing, the demand signals are only increasing, and the only answer here is further strengthening our ability to collaborate. More innovation in that regard is needed. The other thing is management practices, and the thing I'll highlight there is we have fiscal challenges. Money is always an issue, but when you look at the system, right, you look across 18,000 police departments, you look across the federal agencies, bureaus, and programs. There's a lot of resources in the system, and you're struck sometimes when you take that enterprise view that the key issue really is fragmentation. How do you align those different stovepiped appropriations through common approaches, common policy, business processes, interoperable systems, common frameworks, and things like that. So, that's the continuing kind of challenge of the information sharing environment.
Sure.
Is, that work.
Yeah, sounds like some serious challenges there. Donna Roy, how about you've been working in these issues now for quite some time, I guess going back many, many years now, so you've probably seen a lot of challenges along the way. What are some of the ones that are still out there that make it, that you just got to break through this next one in order to get where you want to go and make these programs be what you want them to be?
Yeah, on the spectrum of identity to data, we still have a few things that are chipping away. So I think I worry most about the trust that gets eroded every time we get a large-scale breach like the OPM. We have partners sort of pull back and really ask a lot of questions around the systems that you're deploying, right? Is my data safe? Can I actually put my data here? Is it the next breach? So I think that the trust issue is constantly on my mind. How do I keep the users trusting the platforms we're developing? And in that, as we put data to the edge, strong authentication is an issue. Do I know who you are, Mr. Flyzik? And when you're on my system, can I make sure it's you? And when you're in a mobile environment, that's just harder. I can't stick my PIV card in my iPhone still, right? So mobile authentication and the protection of data and the continued eroding of a trust in government IT is keeping me up at night. How can our state and locals trust us and put their unclassified but sensitive information on the HISN platform and know that I'm doing everything I can to keep that safe. I would say though that we'll keep working to increase strong authentication, putting it at the edge. I really think that we need to find ways to build our data to be more independent, right? So when I ship my data somewhere else, it should be structured in a way someone else understands it. NEAM gets at that. It should be sent with enough information on who should access it. And that's harder. Putting that in with your data is really hard. How do I know I want to share with Jim Flyzik? Maybe I just want to know I want to share with someone who has the same role as Jim. I don't know him personally, right? So moving as much information in with the data as it moves, freeing our data, making it more independent, and protecting it all at the same time. That's really the biggest challenge that we've got today.
Yeah, wow, cool. Now, the good thing about that, remote access and PIV card, I think industry and NIST are aware that that is an issue, that you can't with your remote device carry around and plug something in and swipe a card and all. And I think I just was reading about something NIST is working on, next generation PIV and HSPD12 kinds of technologies that can address that issue in those devices. So hopefully it's coming because the demand is known.
The standards are there.
Yeah.
The implementations are catching up, I would say. Yes.
All right, I want to hear from industry on the same question, too, but first we need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Kshemendra Paul from ODNI, Ray Mendez from DIA, Donna Roy from DHS, Matt Keller from GuidePoint Security, Ralph Kahn from Tanium, and Bobby Marine from HP Enterprise Services. We're talking information intelligence sharing. When we went to break, we had heard from our government guest about some of the challenges they're encountering that they still hope to overcome to get to where they want to go. Let's hear from our industry counterparts. Matt, if I asked you, what are some of the challenges you see in this area that still have to be overcome to get where we need to go?
So I think one of the biggest challenges that we're still trying to accomplish is, as we're talking about cloud and we're trying to move data into the cloud, a lot of people are still trying to understand what cloud means and what sharing data through the cloud is. And going back to what a lot of the other panelists have already talked about is, how do we make sure when we're pushing this data to the cloud, it's protected and we keep data. We might have a full report, but only part of the report is relevant to a state or local agency or group. So how do we redact or protect certain aspects of that data on top of that? So we talked about identification of an individual, but we also need to talk about identification of the data within the data. So data tagging and making sure that the data is relevant to that state, local, or another agency. It's really important as we're talking about moving data into this cloud environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Donna brought up that trust factor, but trust becomes a big deal when you're talking about moving this data around. Bobby, Laurine, what or do you see as some of the challenges that still need to be overcome to really get to where we need to go with this?
One of the big challenges, I think, is sort of the organizational change or culture change that needs to happen in the maturity of the organization. So, for example, go through time, you have an established group of folks, but they leave government, et cetera. You want to retrain and make sure that folks still have the vision of information sharing. So what I found in industry, very happily, is that they've laid out a process, HP has laid out a process, for example, on transformation roadmap activities that bring the stakeholders together to understand exactly what the as-is environment is and where we need to go from a leadership perspective. And it's a great communication mechanism in setting the stage for driving to results and making sure that your plans are actionable and you have measures of merit and measures of effectiveness to drive to results. So that was sort of the nice thing that industry was doing, and it really relates to and benefits information sharing all the way across the board.
Cool, and you kept our streak intact. This is our 123rd show, and we now have had, when we talked about constraints and challenges, someone used the word culture in all 123 shows in terms of some of the challenges. Ralph, Kahn, and Tanium, what do you see as some of the challenges or the constraints out there that still need to get hurdle to get over that to get where we need to go?
So for me, the biggest challenge is the speed at which decisions are getting made has increased, right? You look at some of the key focuses that panelists have made, dealing with terrorism type activity, dealing with cyber activity. Those threats operate at a much faster speed, and that requires people to analyze and act on information very, very quickly. Yeah. Cyber's a good example, right? The bad guys make decisions in milliseconds. Their software is moving all over. That's very, very difficult to cope with. And so our data, our systems, and most importantly, our training and processes need to keep up with that.
Excellent point. Yeah, I've said it many times in the show, we're approaching a world where decision-making time is beginning to approach zero in terms of the time to make a decision. But let's switch now to the future and talk a little bit about what this is all going to mean down the road, what it looks like in your crystal ball. What will the work you're doing today, how will it make a difference in the world we'll be living in down the road and the government programs that we're doing? And let's start with Matt over at GuidePoint Security. Matt, what's your crystal ball look like? Where's this all going for us down the road?
So I think in the future, we're going to be talking about information sharing and making, as Ralph alluded to, the decisions at almost machine speed, getting that intelligence out to the machines and having them help an analyst or an individual make a decision on a relevant topic in a very quick manner. We can't live in the past of, sending snail mail type of aspects. We have to get the decisions out to the field and out to the edge as quickly as possible. We talk about being the pointy tip of the spear. We have to get our information sharing out to that pointy tip of the spear to make actionable decisions in a very quick manner that are not going to affect our country in a negative way. We got to make sure it's a positive aspect when we talk about information sharing and making sure the data is protected, but also getting the right decision done.
Yeah, excellent point. You're right. I don't think the bad guys are going to send out a warning that, hey, we're going to set a bomb off in a half hour, that kind of thing. Bobby, Laurine, what do you think it looks like down the road? What's the future look like to you? Where's this all going?
So I think we're going to have to think about scaling in the sense of the Internet of Things is here today. By 2021, there'll be another 3 billion sensors out there collecting information, and I think that we need to sort of take a really an active view of understanding what that means to the overall environment as we march forward. as we start to scale, what is that going to mean from the cloud all the way through security and our analytics that we need to perform? And I think that we want to make sure that we're using those collectors and benefiting from those collectors, but in addition, making the hard decisions of where the risk lies and providing information and data. And there will be choices of, Robert Cordilla, for example, uses the term democratization of data and providing those decision points to get the data to the first responder, for example. Those are going to be the challenges we have in the future here.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. Donna Roy, you sitting in the middle of a lot of this. I imagine that you do think a little bit about strategically about down the road, and what are the sort of like the next generations of these programs going to look like, and what might they mean? What do you see as sort of the impacts of these programs in the future down the road?
I think that we're realizing that the future is all about the data and the people who understand how to make data interoperable, discoverable, understandable, available for the great missions that we all work for in the government. So the government's in the information business. Mm-hmm. We need to increase the speed to intelligence on the counterterrorism threat. We need to create the speed to threat mitigation in the cyber world. That means integrating your information and loving your data, right? It is all about the data. I think that we're not growing in data scientists and data capabilities in the human way. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to find ourselves challenged to keep up with the breadth of the data, the speed of the data, and how much we need data to make our lives work and to make our decisions more impactful. So it is all about the data and how to find innovative ways to cull it and make it actionable. Mm-hmm.
Sounds like you could write a book. It's all about the data, and talk about. It seems like a book title to me.
It's about the data. About the data.
I like that. It's all about the data. But when you think about it, it is. I mean, it's you're right. I mean, it's just such a wide subject to think about. But well done, Ralph Kahn. What do you see? Where's this all going down the road? What's your crystal ball look like? How will the world be different by all these information and intelligence sharing programs that are making progress?
So I think you go back to the speed thing, and it is all about the data. If you have to make decisions faster, your data has to be better. You have to have the provenance of the data. You have to have the right context in which to operate in, so that you can have confidence that if you're making a fast decision, you're doing it with the best information possible. And to me, systems are evolving in that direction to be able to, kind of free the data, has been said before, but free the data in a context-sensitive way. In other words, it knows who the target is and therefore presents the appropriate context, presents the appropriate provenance, and does not present too much data. So they have just what they need to do their job, and they get it really fast.
I think it's a pretty cool conversation. I'm appreciating data in a whole nother way. It's like data's taking on a human form here. We're going to love the data. It's all about the data. We got to free the data. This is creating a whole new context to think about this stuff. This is I can imagine some of the wild stuff I'll talk about in the future after this particular show. Ray Mendez, what's it look like to you? Where's this all going? What's the future hold for us as a result of these programs?
If we do this correctly, the future vision that I see is the intelligence analysts working inside the intelligence community, their experience will not be that much different from what they would have at home. If they wanted to look up something and hit Google and do a query, they're going to get a page with all their little returns, and they'll click and be able to open it. And that's hopefully what we're going to eventually get to, something like that, in the sense that an intelligence analyst, doesn't matter whether he's, federal, state, law enforcement, whatever. He's trying to find information he needs to do his mission. He does his query, and he'll get the return. And he'll be able to click on that link and go right to the data. And if he, at that moment, doesn't have the right security clearance, or he's not read onto the program, that link he'll click on that, and it'll go contact this point of contact, and this is how you get access to that data. Because I will tell you, in the first 4 months that I was in my position, when I did the rounds and talked to my customers, that was the number one thing I got from the analysts. We spend a large amount of our time just trying to find out where the information is, and then you find out sometimes 2 years into a project that, oh, there's another team in another agency doing the same project from a different angle, and they've got a pile of data that they've been cloistered away looking at, and they don't want to share it. Or, oh, yeah, we'll share it with you, but we just never knew you were looking for it. Right. So my vision of the future is that it'll pretty much be like the World Wide Web, but just on the inside for the
You
intelligence
know what's
data.
going to help drive that too, Ray, when this next generation enters the workforce? I mean, how many of our kids now, what do they expect? They expect information immediately. They expect there's an app for that, and we're going to get the information. So I think the generations coming behind us are going to put a lot of pressure on that, decision making at the speed of light, and where time approaches zero. Kshemendra, Paul, let's talk about the future. You're in the middle of it. You've been a key guy in this from day one. What do you see down the road? What are some of your visions for some of the cool things that are going to be happening down the road?
I really want to key off some of what Ray and Donna and everybody else highlighted. When I think about the ISE, I think about open data plus data standards plus identity, credential, and access management. Right, so there's a lot of parallels between the example of, open data, open government data, the way it works in commercial environments, and what we're really doing here is adding data standards to improve semantic integrity and interoperability, and then the identity and access management to be able to support the policy automation, right? Because in the federal government, we have to be much more concerned about privacy and security than in a lot of other settings. The President's national strategy for information sharing and safeguarding highlighted 3 principles: information as a national asset, shared risk management between sharing and safeguarding, and the point of information sharing is not to create data lakes, but to support better, more proactive decision making to, protect the American people from harm and enhance national security. I think we're hearing that from all of our, my fellow panelists, and it's quite exciting for me too to kind of, have this sort of conversation. 2 ideas that I really want to highlight in terms of the future. I really do think we're seeing something new in the nexus of national security and public safety about how the enterprise there is rationalizing to support addressing priority threats. We know whether it's terrorism, whether it's homeland security, natural disasters, whether it's transnational organized crime, cybersecurity. We are seeing something new with how the federal government works with our state and local partners, how we work together in a secure and trusted way against these common threats. The other thing I'd like to highlight is the progress we're making in distilling in a mission-agnostic way the core frameworks that underlie all the successes you heard about today. And the work that we're doing within the ISE to align those with mainstream of standards. I talked about the Standards Coordinating Council earlier. 3 international standards organizations are a part of that, 4 government standards organizations, several industry associations. This is a one-way street in terms of aligning these frameworks with the mainstream of standards and architecture, and that's going to allow us to, support scaling through industry.
Right.
Really, the only way to do this, and so that's, I think, as that becomes further mature, that productization, the on-ramps for folks to use these frameworks. I think that's going to be transformational.
Fantastic, fantastic. Great content here today, guys, and I'm going to do my best here to try to do some summary with the last couple minutes we have left. We talked about what came across obvious is there is a tremendous amount of progress going on, and I think we talked about public safety and national security blending together with that progress. We talked a lot about the deconfliction going on out there amongst the various entities. The term, I like that freeing the data term, which came up early in progress, and getting that data out there so it's usable and to those that need it. We talked about a lot of information integration going on, and a lot of these one-time diverse sets of networks out there now blending together and interoperating together to get that threat information out quickly so decisions can be made. On specific programs, we heard a lot about eyesight, and we heard a lot about the DHS data framework. Standards alignment came up and the importance of standards alignment. The FBI program on InfoGuard was cited as one that's making some progress, and the hope with software-defined networks and how they can in the future help begin with that analogy of the road expanding and collapsing. We talked about lessons learned. One came across loud and clear is listen to the users and listen to the customer and get the stakeholders involved. Work with that unity of effort and leveraging of efforts, get all the stakeholders around the table so you can make progress together as opposed to having difficult hurdles to hit down the road. And the security of the environment. You have to create that trust so people have believe they're working, can trust one another with secure environment. We talked barriers and constraints. We had some discussion about bandwidth and infrastructure, especially overseas and in places that where individuals are used to getting things quickly, all of a sudden now you're in a part of the world or in a place where the bandwidth and infrastructure is not there. So that has to be dealt with. We talked about the fact that the threats continue to evolve, and we need to collaborate to get proactive, to get in front of them, to begin thinking like, what are the next threats and what are the bad guys thinking about, so we can get the controls in quickly. The culture change came up, as it does every show. The need to, we're asking people to change a little bit about the way they do things, and people are, by their nature, are resistant to change. And we talked about the speed of decisions, that decisions are going to have to be made very, very quickly, and we're going to have those capabilities to do that. The future, we talked about scaling. It's going to get larger and larger, more and more data. The technology is going to need to keep up. We talked about the future is going to be all about the data, and we talked about the data in human terms, and I actually enjoyed that conversation. I thought that was a very interesting way to look at things. Kshemendra brought up that blending together national security and public safety, as well as the core frameworks that are going place. My takeaway from all this is what it's all about is saving lives in the future. That's what I take away from this. Everything you've been talking about, it's about making that. With that, I need to thank our panelists for taking time from their very, very busy days. Thanks to our sponsors, for without which we wouldn't have the show. Thanks to the good people here at Federal News Radio, and most importantly, thank you to all the listening audience out there that tunes in and listens to the show each month. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM.